All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Brianna Yoakum. I'm the accreditation coordinator for Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences. I'm also the coordinator of professional development, so I help out with these webinars.
Am I on as you?
Oh, sorry. Let's see here. Just gonna mute. There's a couple of people that got unmuted. Yes, and we're joined here today by Stephanie Lane, and she is with Pure Washington. So we're going to be able to have this meeting recorded, like I said, and we'll also be able to send out the slides to everybody. And it's a little bit large group today, so if you have any questions, she's more than willing to take questions along the way. So just raise your hand or put it in the chat, and yeah, and I'll make sure to try to get those answered for you guys along the way. So good morning, everyone, and I'll pass it to Stephanie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm actually going to stop sharing and I'm going to see all your beautiful faces. My name is Stephanie Lane and I'm the Chief Workforce Development Officer for Pure Washington. And before that, I was the director of the Pure Workforce Alliance for 8 years for the Washington State University Peer Support Training Hub. And I'm really happy to be with Pure Washington. I've been doing this training for about 7 years, 6 or 7 years, and it's changed so much with all of the different changes with peer support and the licensing changes and things like that. And this is generally, I do this in person on a 2-day training. And the first day we have supervisors and we do a full supervisor training. And the second day we do the operationalizing peer support with the peers and the supervisors together. And so generally what I like to do is I like to find out from the audience, because there's so many things that I could talk to you guys about, right? So I want to find out from you guys specifically, what do you want to know? Like what are some of the questions that you feel like you would have spent some good time today if you learned the answers to at the end of the day? Just wondering, like, are you interested in licensing? Are you interested in how to become a certified peer counselor? Are you interested in supervision? I have a full PowerPoint that covers everything that we need to cover, but I would love to hone it down just to see what you guys are interested in learning. And I am going to start with Carol. Carol Rocha, are you there?
I am here.
Hi, what would you like to learn today?
So I am already a certified peer counselor, but I'm not actually working in that role. I just add it to, because I'm a behavioral health case manager. So I kind of like add that into the current role. But I'm interested in learning just about anything and everything that I can regarding that and how to be more effective with my clients.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. How about Ricky Cook? What would you like to learn today about peer support? And the training is about operationalizing peer support. So there's really nothing off the table.
Sorry about that. I couldn't figure out how to get off mute on my phone. We are already offering peer services in our organization. What we are hoping to do is learn more about how to bill for additional peer services. We have a couple of recovery cafes and a clubhouse opening later this fall. And so we just are looking for some clarity on, mostly on billing and on where we could find information about how to use the codes properly and document for each of them.
Perfect. And so I'll make sure that we touch on documentation and supervision. Thank you.
And then just the billing piece of that. Is the billing piece of that also part of this particular training?
I do. I have the licensing and the billing. There's really only one code for peer support, and it's 308. And
okay.
The only difference in that you will bill that code for both one-to-one and group peer support. The only difference is if there's any folks working with tribes here, that's a totally different reimbursement. And I can talk about that a little bit today, but I prefer to talk about it more one-on-one.
Perfect. And then I just wanted to clarify also this is being recorded. Will we have, I'm traveling right now, so I'm just concerned of whether I'll be able to stay on the whole time or if I'll lose service here. Is there an option? Will you be emailing that out to all of us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely, Ricky. After the end of the presentation today, the recording will be put up on our YouTube page. We'll send you out a direct link to be able to access that, as well as all of the slides from today.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Cindy Adams, what would you like to learn today? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm kind of an odd duck included in this, and I'm so thankful that I can. I've been a CPC for years and years and years. However, I've not directly provided necessarily peer support services. I've been an ombuds for like 25 years, an advocate. So I'm looking to, just get more information again. The supervision part is really interesting to me. The documentation is interesting to me. Actually, everything about peer support is really interesting. I love, even as an ombudsman, to share parts of your story in an effort to, help people understand they're not alone, and you can get through things that you never imagined that you would get through, and to speak up and use your voice. So I'm just excited to be here and participate.
I'm so happy you're here. That's so great. I love it when you're in one of our trainings. Let me see, who else? So anybody want to volunteer what you guys are interested in learning? So I don't want to put anybody on the spot by calling on people, although thank you so much for all the answers that you've already given me. Chris, I see that you're unmuting yourself maybe. Chris, what would you like to learn today?
First of all, just to introduce myself, I've been involved in the NAMI Thurston Mason chapter as a volunteer for the last 6 years. And I am active in outreach and participation in support and education classes for both the peer track, the veteran track, and the family to family tracks. Often persons wanting to understand some ways that they can go with the skills that they learn around NAMI, peer support comes up as a possible direction for folks to go. Most recently, our chapter has become involved in the Thurston County Hub, which is being created following other models for the purposes of being, as best as can be, different days of the week, a one-shop location for persons who are involved in the criminal justice system, both family and friends, as well as the individual themselves. And obviously, peer support participation is one thing that people can see as a future thing for them to get themselves involved in. So I'm here to just listen and learn so I can answer questions and direct people in a good, purposeful direction.
Wonderful, welcome. Thank you. I love thinking about NAMI and peer support together. I think that that's such a perfect fit. Boy, I'm seeing some really, Vicki from Exchange. I just want you guys to know that Vicki went through our full Operationalizing Peer Support program. And Vicki, do you have any questions? What would you like us to cover today? And if you would you be willing to just give a little bit of your experience about how the consultation has helped your organization?
Sure. Actually, I am so happy to see your face, Stephanie. Hi. A couple of our staff people are on this Zoom, and when I heard Stephanie's name, I'm like, I'm jumping on. So our experience consulting with Stephanie on operationalizing our peer support program was phenomenal. We have been doing peer work in our community. We're going to be going on year 20 here pretty soon. And it has always been our heart. We've had peers come in and get built up, and then, you know, they leave. And the consultation really set us up to really pull the trigger, so to speak. And it really has launched several different outreach programs, as well as really changed the culture and dynamics of what we're doing at the Recovery Center in our community. And so I highly recommend her, and just the wisdom that she brings to the table. And she's just makes herself really very available. You can tell it's her heart. And she really just wants to help, you know, organizations utilize their peers in just the most impactful way. So
thank you so much, Vicki. In exchange, they dug in. We met with their full staff, and we met over several months, and the consultation is only as good as how you guys implement it and take it, and the questions that you guys ask. And they were in it 1,000%.
sorry.
No problem. And so what I love to see, I love to figure out ways to pay for peer support for agencies that are already utilizing that type of modality. And there's lots of different ways we're going to talk about today about billing for peer support. We're going to talk about licensing. We're going to talk about community funding. We're going to talk about grant funding. We're also going to talk about a concept called the hub and spoke. So if you aren't an agency that's set up as an affiliated agency or a behavioral health agency, but you still want to work with certified peer counselors in your agent, there's a way that Peer Washington is the main employer. And then we deploy peer support to different agencies around Washington state. And we'll be able to talk about that as well. That's usually the fastest way people can get up and running in their peer support program. Who else? Joan, what would you like to learn?
Hi there. Thank you. Boy, did I land in the right place. I am the manager of the family and youth part of the behavioral health program for the Muckleshoot Indian tribe. And we have a larger adult mental health, both mental health, substance use disorder for adults and youth. So we're a pretty big bunch. We just, I think about 2 months ago, have our first certified peers. And our first tribal member who became certified as a peer. But the truth is we don't have a program for peers yet. So this was forwarded to me on Tuesday, and I was actually thinking, because I was on vacation last week, and I was like, wow, I really need to talk to other agencies and find out how they integrate their peers into the clinical team. And basically everything else. We've got the support of our billing person says, yep, we're ready to go. It's almost like everything's in place except for the program and how we're going to use everybody. So I'm really excited to bring this to the tribal community, because I think it's a really culturally, it's a good fit to have the peer supports. And I find that we're already doing some of it kind of unofficially. So we will likely reach out to you, Stephanie, for consult, because that's exactly where we are at this point. So I'm happy to be here. However, we have a community event today, so I'm going to have to leave at noon. So I only have 2 hours, but hopefully Stephanie reaching out, we can get some more help with getting set up.
Absolutely. And we actually trained your peer support. We were the ones that brought in the bridge.
Oh, okay. Great.
And so you guys do the barn, you guys have,
yes.
So, and I work really closely with Julia Joyce.
Okay, so good.
Whenever you want me to come up, we've had one operationalizing peer support meeting. And just as a side note, we built up a program for Lummi Nation, and they utilize peer support in their college, in the DVR, and in their behavioral health. So I'll really look forward to connecting with you.
Yeah, and I'll reach out to you to set something up. I think you might have met with Aaron and Julia.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I should have been at this meeting, because
you should have been.
Yeah, the barn is kind of my baby, and the 3 certified peers are working at the barn at this point, and then we have a couple at our girls' sacred house that haven't completed their state test yet, but they're just about there. So
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so I'll reach out to you on the side for some specifics, but I'm really happy to be here today.
Great. Thank you so much. And don't hesitate to speak up and ask any questions as we move forward.
Usually not a problem for me, so thanks.
That is true. All right. Anybody else have any questions before we?
Yeah, Ronita, hi.
Hi, Ronita.
I'm multitasking here. So I have a certified, well, peer run funding from the state, and my organization is Caring with Compassion Community, and we focus on the BIPOC community and other marginalized communities out in unincorporated Pierce County in the Graham area. So we also have tapped into recovery funding, recovery housing and everything. And we have some programs in place. We got funds from the Washington Micro Enterprise Association to start our micro enterprise to help our community members we're serving to do some self-employment things and opportunities. And also we are supporting those individuals that's interested in becoming certified peer counselors. We have some of our team members who have become certified peer counselors with our support. They're working as patient navigator, peer navigator advocates, because we also contracted as a foundational community supports provider with housing and employment. And so we want to help our community, those with the BIPOC community, to have a pathway to employment by volunteering as a FCS provider with us, and leading that could lead to employment, but also helping individuals start their own businesses with their unique talents and skills, and also doing some self-advocacy and systems changing, civic involvement and engagement, and helping individuals navigate the legislative system and things like that. So that's what we're doing. And we just had 2 workshops, an advocacy workshop, a 4-part series in partner with Disability Rights of Washington. And we're also partnering with another one of our partners that's in North Carolina that has already proven evidence-based cultural with sustaining the BIPOC community and so forth. So I'm here to learn how we can provide, I guess, billing for peer support that's specifically focusing on the BIPOC community with equity and everything like that as we move forward.
That is fantastic. I just private chatted you about Jones Community Solutions. They specifically focus, they're a consulting agency and they're also a training hub. And they were just awarded the very first certified peer counseling 5-day training contract specifically for BIPOC only. And they just had their very first training and it was absolutely phenomenal. It just blew everybody out of the water. And it was like giving people water that have been in a desert for months and months. We have sadly ignored the BIPOC community when rolling out most of these programs, and it is important for us to make a concentrated effort to bring in as much diversity, inclusion, and equity as possible through these programs. Renita, did you have another hand?
No, I was trying to put it down.
Okay. When you said FCS, were you talking about foundational community supports?
Yes, we're a contracted FCS provider.
Okay, great. So I just put that link in the chat. One of the things that we will talk about, and I'm really glad that there's some FCS folks here, you can get reimbursed, and we'll definitely go over this. I'm just getting warmed up here this morning, but you can get reimbursed $100 an hour for any employment or housing work that you do through the AmeriGroup Foundational Community Supports Program. It's a fantastic way to fund peer support without having to specifically bill Medicaid and do Medicaid notes. Even though you still have to do that, but it's a little bit less of a lift than becoming a behavioral health agency, an affiliated agency, and then getting a Medicaid approved note system.
Okay, well, I need more information on that, because what we're doing right now, we are providing, helping people in the community connect to housing and employment as FCS providing. We are doing notes, but also we have the recovery residents. So we kind of, how do we navigate that and appropriately documenting? And so what you're saying, that's, I never heard of that. I know they just introduced the TAPS program. And so, yeah, so I would want to pick your brain, Stephanie, kind of have a one-on-one or something after this.
Totally.
Yeah.
I always joke that it's slim pickings, but if I don't know something, I promise you, I've been in the work. The only claim to fame I have is actually longevity. I've just been around so long that I've been through all of these changes, and I've worked as a therapist, and I've worked as a peer, and I've worked as, in administration. And so I'll be so happy to talk to you, and I would love to connect you with more folks that are doing BIPOC peer support. So if my dream is to have a BIPOC coalition that advises the healthcare authority, and Dakota Steele is the senior manager of the Office of Consumer Affairs. They call it Office of Consumer Partnerships or Recovery Partnerships. But that's actually the office that has a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion funding. And so let's connect afterwards.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Any questions? Anybody just want to introduce themselves and say hi and talk a little bit?
I think Jason.
Yeah, Stephanie, just to follow up a little bit, and I get a lot of phone calls from our accredited providers, housing providers, and ones that are currently working to get accredited. So it sounds like the easiest way for them to be able to utilize and mobilize peer support that they can bill for sounds like through this FCS program is a majority of them are not BHAs with the state.
That is definitely a solution that I talk about. Okay. And it's one of the easiest ways to fund and because you guys are really doing peer support. So anybody can do foundational community supports. It could be a case manager, it could be a program manager, it could be a peer support specialist. It just depends on how you want to formulate your FCS program. If you want to hire all certified peer counselors to do it, what I'm here to tell you is that you're going to get reimbursed $100 an hour as opposed to $56 an hour with Medicaid.
Gotcha.
Because each unit of peer support gets reimbursed at $14 a unit, which is at 15 minutes. So an hour of that is like, I don't know, $56. 14 times 4.
But with the Mera group, the billing structure is just different. It's $100 an hour, correct?
That's correct, right? Nope.
Well, yeah, because it's $112 is a per diem, $112 a day for housing. If you're doing supportive housing, no matter how many contacts you have with that community member you're supporting around housing, or you're talking to third-party agencies, you only getting reimbursed $112 for that day for supportive housing. Now, supportive employment is $27 an hour per 50 minutes up to 4 units. So that's the difference with the rate reimbursement. So what we have hired, we have part-time peer navigator advocates, and they are certified peers. And that's what we want to hire. Our job descriptions is for certified peer counselors. That's preferred. And we want to help individuals that we may be supporting that's in their recovery journey and they need a pathway to employment. And this is a way to give back. So we offer them this as an option to support them with volunteering with us as a P&A. And then we support them with connecting with the state and doing a prerequisite and moving forward for the state exam and training to become a peer navigator. But again, the rate is $112.
And is that per person, right? That's not.
Yeah, per person.
Right. So, and generally people meet for about an hour, but sometimes you might meet for like 3 hours, depending on what the housing need is, right?
But it still would be that
$112.
$12, yeah, for that day, no matter how many times. It have to be 15 minutes or more, because they understand when you're helping someone navigate housing, you may meet an hour or more, or you may just meet 15 minutes or 30 minutes to help them fill out an application and stuff, or talking to a third party agency or something like that. But that's the rate, is just $112 for however often you're meeting that day with that one individual. But if you're meeting with multiple people, that adds up. But it's a flat rate of $112.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. It's a fantastic program. And also, it's also AmeriGroups and MCO. And so there might be some different negotiated rates as well if you're bundling with AmeriGroup. But what might be a great idea is after this training is to have someone like Matt Gower or somebody who runs the Foundational Community Supports Program from AmeriGroup and from the Healthcare Authority to come in and actually give a really robust overview of that program. Because I don't run that program, but I definitely refer a lot of people to it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Renita.
Yeah. So, Christian, do you want to learn anything?
Are you speaking to me?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just, I'm a recovery advocate, certified recovery coach here at a women's recovery residence in Walla Walla. I just completed the prereqs for the Washington State Peer Certified Counseling, and am applying for that bridge training. So I'm just here to learn more about that.
Fantastic. And where do you live?
Walla Walla, Washington.
Walla Walla. Okay, well, we're doing a bridge training in July, but that's a little bit of a hike for you.
So can you tell me, where are you doing that bridge training at?
In Olympia.
Oh, that's not, and then, sorry, I know this is just all about me all of a sudden, but what are the training dates on that?
Why don't you email me and I'll get you the next 3 bridge training dates. In fact, one of them is actually going to be at Muckleshoot.
Okay.
So we have 2 more bridge trainings at Muckleshoot, and then Pure Olympia is putting one on in July, which is open to everybody.
Perfect. I will go ahead and send you my email, and if you can send me that information, that would be great.
You got it. Will do. Okay, Herschel, have I spoken with you yet?
No.
What would you like to learn today?
I'm just sort of kind of just, I'm one of those bugs that I just like to sit back and whatever you guys feed me, I just absorb it and soak it up, and then hopefully try to utilize it in the future.
Perfect. Welcome. Amanda, what would you like to learn today?
Hi there. I am not a certified peer yet. I am out of Kitsap County. I've been in a peer role for about 3 months now. I have past experience with outreach, going into encampments and stuff like that. So I'm pretty new in this position, and I just want to learn anything and everything that I can.
Wonderful. Welcome. Karen Cross, would you like to, and a no is as good as a yes if you just want to pass and you just want to.
I think Karen is on a crisis call right now. She just messaged me. So if you'd pass on her for right now.
Got it. Thank you. Sarah Parker, CBAB, welcome. Anything in particular you'd like to learn today, Sarah? Okay. Yes, I'm going to put my email. Somebody just asked for my email. I'm just going to put it in the chat again, and we'll put it in there again at the end. All right. Anybody else like to throw out a question that you might have? All right, we're going to feel free to ask questions as we move forward throughout the training. We have a lot to get to, so I'm going to start rolling. I'm going to go from the beginning. And I have two screens up here so I can see you guys on one side and I'll be doing the presentation on the other. Feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to take care of yourself during this training. Self-care is really important. I don't need to see your faces. I trust that you guys are paying attention to, you showed up for a reason. And so if you need to take a phone call or do some work or anything like that, feel free. We're super flexible. And I'm happy to repeat anything if you miss something. We're going to start out with a quiz. How many people know who can supervise a substance use disorder certified peer counselor? Joan, who do you think could supervise a substance use disorder certified peer counselor?
That's a good question that I'm not sure I know the answer to. So I really don't know, to be honest.
That's totally okay. There's something that I'll send to you guys. It's called the State Plan Amendment from 2019. Only a mental health professional can supervise a mental health certified peer counselor.
Okay.
And only a substance use disorder professional can supervise a SUD peer counselor.
Okay.
Now, the cool thing about peer support is that it also covers co-occurring disorder. And so how does that supervision work, right? And so if you have more lived experience and you consider yourself a mental health certified peer counselor, then you have substance use disorder or co-occurring disorder experience, and that could be eating disorder, gambling, anything in addition to mental health, anything that makes it a co-occurring, you can practice that under the supervision of a mental health professional. Same goes for the substance use disorder professional. They can supervise certified peer counselors whose main job is to provide substance use disorder peer support. But if they also have mental health challenges or are in recovery from those, or if they're in recovery from eating disorder or gambling or anything else like that, it's the lived experience of the certified peer counselor that determines their scope of work. All right, so true or false? Any questions?
I do have a question about that. Just
okay, Joan and Jason.
So because the training's the same, so what you focus on is the lived experience of the peer is what they're eligible for, but the training and the certification is the same for everybody, correct?
That is absolutely correct. So
okay.
The training and the exam is the same.
Right.
The only difference in training is if you're a youth, young adult, or a family member. And we created a family peer support program that's taught by families, that's taught by young adults specifically. And a lot of those people that get that training go in and work on WISE teams, which is wraparound with intensive services. Those are family wraparound teams.
So Stephanie, in the case of a housing provider or someone who has one of these, what's called the FCS contract, who exactly would be doing the supervision in that setting to be able to bill for utilizing peers?
Well, that's a great question. So you would just have a different funding stream, and we wouldn't call it Medicaid reimbursable peer support. You would just hire certified peer counselors to work in your FCS program.
Got you. Okay, so though you would have employ peers to work for you, just so I understand correctly, the bar is not, the supervision bar is not as high. The actual provider could be doing the supervision and billing in that particular instance.
That's correct. And okay. I'm not an expert on foundational community support, so I will take everything I say with a grain of salt, and know that I put in the link to the foundational community support program, and you can research that on your own. But my understanding is that it's a lot less rigor regarding supervision, because It's just a different type of program. And you don't have to be an affiliated agency either. We'll talk a little bit about what that means.
Thank you.
I want to add to that as an FCS provider. What FCS is doing right now, they are doing fidelity reviews. So they are trying to have a more uniformed approach with FCS providers in having how documentation is done to get accreditation. So they are offering FCS providers an opportunity to train and learn what's the appropriate way of documenting based on Medicaid standard, because that is Medicaid reimbursable through the state, and AmeriGroup is the third party administrator that's overseeing the FCS providers, the contract for HCA. And so again, the state is looking at how they can more uniform the documentation to become, so providers can become accredited in doing this work. So that is something to that they are doing. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And from my understanding is that from all the data that's come in, the Foundational Community Supports Program has been extremely successful. Renita, do you feel like it's been successful, or is it too soon to tell?
No, it's been extremely successful because, again, utilizing peers to do, to help peers navigate services as they're on their journey in recovery, that is a good approach. And I think that's what the state is recognizing and utilizing, where it's allowable to hire certified peer counselors because of that lived experience aspect. And the need is so great for people because people are dealing with various different types of traumas and things, and they need someone who could relate to where they are. And I think the old way of doing things, like with case managers and stuff, that state workers, it seemed, you know, that upside down or that unequal
hierarchy.
Yeah. So that is kind of leveling the field. And I think it's working where people are feeling comfortable, you know, talking to someone that they feel that they can relate to. At the same time, the curveball that's happening is for those with lived experience to learn the administrative side of things. That's what I'm having with my team, that they know how to navigate these systems and advocate, but now they're on the back end of it and learning now with the case managers that work with them, the paperwork, the documentation and stuff, and learning how to navigate the different softwares and stuff like that. That may be a big curveball for training your team to learn those things if they have no computer skills. So that's why we're looking at how can we have them come in and volunteer and work up, you know, get their skill sets this type of work, because they know it, but they still need those skills, the technical skills to provide the services. But it has been a success on a statewide level because of housing affordability, and just you get overwhelmed with that process and doing the coordination of that. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So do you guys think that certified peer counselors have more HIPAA violations than other providers? The answer is absolutely not. Number one, it's a newer field, so they haven't had as much time as other providers. But also, there's a Yale article that I'm going to quote. I'll pull it up in a little bit. And it's on peer support. And it says that the data actually suggests that because people who are certified peer counselors have the lived experience, they're more protective of personal information than other people who might not have had that lived experience and had to go through the system and maybe understand what it feels like to have their information breached. Also, we teach in the class that there's a fine for every HIPAA violation. There's a fine for not only the person who created that HIPAA violation, but also for the agency. And so you want to make sure that one of the big trainings, if you're going to create a peer support program, you want to train people on CFR 42 and HIPAA, protected health information, because that is a really big place where you can have some risk. Now, I've personally never met the HIPAA police, but I know that some of the fines can be upwards. There's a cap, and I think for the individual, it's $25,000 per violation, and for the agency, it's $50,000 up to $300 or $500. I haven't looked at it recently, but it's not anything that you really want to be involved in. You want to make sure that all the peers are trained in every other, in all the same aspects as all the other employees that you have. So this is kind of what we consider the birth of peer support. This is a hospital in Paris. And there was a guy, his name's Jean Baptiste Poussin. In 1793, he wrote a letter to a gentleman named Philippe Pinel, who was actually hospitalized in this hospital for tuberculosis. And he was right next to an individual who we believe had a diagnosis of schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, which they didn't really have that diagnosis at the time. But he was appalled at how that individual was treated. That individual was chained to the bed right next to him, was served meals like an animal. And this gentleman right next to him, who was being treated for tuberculosis, had his meals brought to him by a nurse. He was treated very fairly. And this was before they actually separated the mental health and the physical health side of hospitals. And most of the hospitals at that time were ran by churches. So they called them servants, people who worked in the hospitals. Now, the quote is, "As much as possible, all servants are chosen from the category of mental patients. They are at any rate better suited to this demanding work because they are usually more gentle, honest, and humane." And so this was really the first recorded, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. People with lived experience, they generally have more empathy. They have more patience. They have more gratitude for the recovery that they're in. And so the guy who was running the hospital, Jean Baptiste, said he wants to hire people who have these qualities. And then actually, Philippe Pinel came back and he started something, he started the very first mental health ward in Paris. So you can read up on that too. A little bit of history. Renita, I'm just going to assume that your hand is just still up. Is that the case? So
it is. Put it down.
No problem. So the history. So Washington State offers certified peer counseling trainings, and certified peer counselor providers either have lived experience or are the parents or children with experience in behavioral health recovery. Washington State started offering certified peer counseling trainings in 2005 and prides itself on being one of the first 11 states, of course, we're clearly the 11th, to have a fully Medicaid recognized reimbursable peer support program. And initially, peer support services were authorized only for mental health treatment. And that was just an oversight. We started creating this peer support program in 2005, but that was when mental health was called the Mental Health Division. And then the Substance Use Division was actually called DASA. Never the two shall meet, but through integration, they discovered that certified peer counselors would be excellent in the substance use disorder world. And so in 2019, they created something called the State Plan Amendment, where substance use disorder professionals were set up to supervise certified peer counselors who work in the substance use disorder field. And now it's just exploded. The one thing that a regret or like a challenge that I might have with that is that in order to really shine a light on the difference between substance use disorder, peer support, and mental health, they did away with the term behavioral health, so that they knew that they were very separate tracks. But in reality, substance use disorder, mental health, it's all behavioral health. And I believe that all people can benefit from peer support. So here we talk a little bit about, and it's so funny, my supervisor Josh, the CEO and president, just walked in to my office, and I would love it if he would describe the peer workforce development, the Peer Washington model, because it's a very unique and amazing model. And Josh, do you want to come and talk a little bit about the Purewow model? Or are you busy?
Well, I have 12 minutes and set up my computer, go to the bathroom, and be on the phone. So I can do a little quick one, or
why don't you do it a little bit later? I'll be here till 2. Okay.
And I don't know if you're talking about, I'm happy to yeah, meet up with you.
It's the Washington, it's the housing folks. So yeah, we love training with you guys. So in a nutshell, the Peer Washington model, they have volunteers, they have coaches, they have PSSs, which are peer support specialists. They have program managers, program directors, and then chief operating officers. But this is a grassroots, this is one of the most incredible grassroots organizations that I've ever even known about, let alone worked for. And more volunteers, I love the volunteer aspect of it, because maybe some people are just new in recovery. They don't know if they want to like get back to work or not. Or maybe they just want to be productive. Maybe there's somebody on Social Security disability that just wants like 5 hours and to be in the recovery world. And then we have this whole coach component, which basically in a nutshell gets reimbursed at about $20 an hour as a stipend. And you can do as much or as little coaching as you want. And they match, they do a really, really intense, great job of matching people, the right people to the right coach. And we do lots of different programs. We have peer support in the libraries, in the King County libraries. We're creating a peer support program for the Department of Corrections. We are the first agency that created a first responder behavioral health peer support program. And we're doing a recovery navigators program now. And one of the coolest, most exciting and somewhat daunting projects that we just got is we were just awarded a 10 region behavioral health advocacy contract, which is formerly known as the Ombuds contract. So that's what Cindy was talking about. That's what Cindy does for a living. She's one of the longest standing ombudsmen in the state of Washington. And if you don't know what the word ombudsman means, which a lot of people don't, it's actually kind of been a barrier. They're behavioral health advocates. They're behavioral health advocates that go in and make sure that the rights of the people in the public mental health system, in the hospitals, and in treatment centers, that they are getting respected, and that if they have a complaint or a grievance, that they're being treated with dignity and respect, and that those are being solved at the lowest possible level. So, and we have several sites across Washington. We have Spokane, Seattle, Kent, Olympia, and then our division is Workforce Development Division, and we're in Olympia as well. And a lot of people want us to start opening in a lot of different areas, but we're trying to slow the growth so that we can catch up to this amazing expansion that we've been involved in. Anybody have any questions about the peer support model, the Peer Washington model, the peer support? This is also the first agency that has created and implemented the hub and spoke model. So we have contracts with behavioral health agencies where we provide the peer support specialists, and they work in different agencies. One of the agencies that we do this in is Evergreen Treatment Center, where the certified peer counselors are employed with Peer Washington. they're deployed to Evergreen Treatment Center, and that creates something called a dual supervision strategy. So they're getting their clinical supervision from the clinical directors and clinicians and supervisors at Evergreen Treatment Center, but they're getting all of their benefits. On paper, they work for Pure Washington, and they're getting their peer support supervision through us. Again, that's called the hub and spoke model. So Pure so here's like some pros and cons. Pure Washington does coaching and non-Medicaid billing. And there's some pros and cons, right? So if you're not doing Medicaid billing, you're probably working off of grants or untethered funding, maybe donations or something like that. When we use recovery coaches mostly instead of certified peer counselors, and it's a very informal process, and there's very light documentation. And that's to protect the unity and the integrity of the coach-coachee relationship. But it's also, it's just the nature of recovery coaching, right? And then Medicaid, it's a whole nother animal. When you do the notes, you have to do Medicaid related notes. They have to be on an encrypted Medicaid approved system. Your notes have to be reviewed by your supervisor, and there has to be attention paid to what's called the golden thread. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the documentation slide. But when you are doing non-Medicaid peer support programming, you really don't have to worry about all of the ins and outs. And some people feel like when we moved peer support into a Medicaid arena, that we clinicalized it, or we made it a little bit more clinical, or we made it less community oriented. And that depends on the certified peer counselor as to how they implement. But it is more difficult to stay very true and very peer in a Medicaid billing environment, because there's clinicians, there's clinical directors, there's clinical speak, and during meetings and trainings, people, they tend to take shortcuts and they start to utilize some of that clinical language, and we don't want peers to be using that clinical language at all. Nothing's going to alienate somebody that you're working with as a certified peer counselor faster than you starting to use a lot of clinical jargon when they have been set up to know and understand your role as a non-clinical leveled playing field relationship. Any questions so far?
I have a comment. I know with my team, because we are my background is case management. I used to work with the state as a DDA case manager. And so I understand the importance of documentation when you, especially with Medicaid billing and things like that. So what I have with my team, the certified peer counselors that I support, they started off as mentees with me. And so I started training them how to document, and also using like plain language so they can get the gist of what the goal was and what the outcome when they're meeting with someone. But also I was working with them to kind of show by example, to show how that documentation needed to, like a cohort, so to speak, with my mentees. So they kind of watch what I was doing as I was supporting them. So I think that is important to know. Is informal with the documentation, but to start training your team that certified peer counselors on how they should be documenting the outcome. What is the outcome you're trying to get with that individual? So just wanted to add that in as a comment.
That's a really great comment. And I see Danira, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it right. Danira
Yes, Danira, you got that
Hi.
right. Thank you. Hello,
Yay.
everyone. My name's Danira. I'm with Exchange, and Vicky was on here a little bit ago. And I just want, we are currently, so peer support, and I want to also just comment really quickly on what you said about slowing down the growth because we're trying to catch up. And that's really what's, I feel, encapsulates what's going on in our communities here in Clark County, is that it's just growing, and it's kind of like this bubbling cauldron and just waiting to just jump out of the pot. And we're really excited. That's kind of where we are at Exchanges. We're currently doing the series hosted by Healthcare Authority, and so that's going to be our next step, is getting everybody trained on documentation so we can just pull the trigger on our peer billing. We recently met with Daniel Smith from CHPW, which has been a tremendous help and support for us as far as getting that peer support. So we're kind of we have our footing in all these different areas. We just are looking into doing all the primitive work into launching the FCS program here at Exchange as well. And then on the other side, so I coordinate the Parents for Parents program, and that's run on a grant, and that's funded by legislature. So we have the Medicaid billing side, getting our peers credentialed and trained up, ready to go to start Medicaid billing. And then some of our other programs are solely grant funded. And so that's kind of being, starting off with grants is kind of giving us the wiggle room to get trained. And then now that we kind of have that background, we can go into Medicaid building, right? And that's kind of our sustainability plan moving forward. And so we really appreciate this training and really learning a lot from it. And so thank you for everybody that's commenting. Thank you, Stephanie. We're big fans of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I am big fans of you guys. Right back, Exchange. You guys are phenomenal. I can't believe that for so many years you guys were doing all that work for free. God was just like serving it up for y'all.
Amen to that.
Meat, but it's amazing what you guys have done. All right, so this is really great segue into sustainability and funding.
Okay, good. I've been having problems with this headset.
I'm going to do something. I'm going to move really quickly. So hold on, you guys. So I want to, I'm just going to move so that I can hear. Otherwise, you're going to hear my boss talking on his other training. Thanks, you guys. Okay, cool. This will be good. I want to talk to you guys about sustainability and funding, and I want to know how you guys are currently funded. Jason, how are most of these folks currently funded?
So it comes from a very, I guess, various different and definitely braided funding approaches. A lot of the individuals, the recovery residences that are just doing strictly the housing model and have a little bit of peer support modality built into it. I guess the truth is most of their funding comes from smaller contracts, if you will, within the different counties, through the Department of Corrections and some grant opportunities. And when somebody first gets into recovery, is for a lot of us, funding can sometimes be a barrier. And there's a lot of individuals out there that have big hearts and are willing to take the individuals in just to see to it that they have a good chance at recovery and being able to provide them a clean and sober housing residence to live in. So the funding sometimes can be a bit of a struggle, and sometimes a lot of the housing providers it's so much of a struggle that they're barely able to make it from month to month. So I know that the funding has been a huge topic, and it comes up over and over. So this is just, Stephanie, I know this is going to be so appreciated by so many of our providers, that there's the options out there and the different billing options for their different modalities to be able to bring in the peer support and be able to supplement some of their programs.
Absolutely. Thank you for that information. And you guys can be so creative because you do have housing. Like if you wanted to have an on-site peer support specialist, you could offer them a discount on their housing, or maybe they get their housing taken care of totally, but their job is to do peer support, right? Like there's also, I want you guys to think about United Way. Think about the Elks. I call them the animal clubs. Think about the Eagles, the Elks. There are so many organizations that are willing and ready to provide funding. It might be a one-time $5,000 grant. It might be $10,000 a year if it's a United Way. If you can get on a United Way cycle, there's lots of grants. Particularly, there's some COVID money left over right now. But you guys can also look at the HUD housing grants cycles. There's just so many places where you guys can look for funding. I want to make sure that we're not just having blinders on for Medicaid and for foundational community supports, because that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. I think a housing program that creates a peer support program would really benefit from a braided funding stream, where you have 1/3 coming from Medicaid, 1/3 coming from donations, and maybe 1/3 coming from another grant or a different source. That's going to build a really strong foundation. Also, putting peer support in different parts of the different programs that you guys run, like Exchange does or Lamination has done. Sometimes those programs can be, the reimbursement for those programs can be leveraged. And that's a really great way to sustain your peer support program. But you want to start, when you start out, you just want to have a meeting with everybody and say, what do we want this program to look like? Like, what's the outcome? I love to think in a logic model, right? And so when we think in a logic model, you think of the outcome first. And so I want you guys to start thinking, what is the outcome that I want? Like, what do we want? Do we want people like, and we think of funding towards the end, right? And a logic model has inputs, throughputs, and outputs, right? And so the inputs we want to consider, first of all, what's the outcome that we want? Do we want people to be connected and feel safe in housing? Then that's what we say. And then we build it backwards. What needs to go into the program to actually build it? Well, we need money, we need resources, we need people to do the work, right? And so what are the inputs that we have to put into it? Well, you guys are doing it right now. You need training, you need to understand, right? And the throughputs are like, what are the things that we have to continue to do to keep the program running, right? And those are basic accountability things, any kind of evaluations that you guys, it's not evaluation, it's like, what is it? It's when somebody comes and looks to see if you're doing the program correctly. It's just kind of an assessment or an evaluation of the program to make sure that you guys are hitting all of the cylinders that you're supposed to be hitting. And it's like a review, like a quality review team will come in and look and see if you guys are doing the programs correctly. It's kind of, you guys are actually in charge of making sure that the recovery homes are like credentialed, they're following all the rules, right? That's what you
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Cool. So you want to think outside the box when you're thinking about sustainability and funding, but we'll definitely talk about what the Medicaid sustainability looks like. And so in 2019, like I said, substance use disorder was added to the services that certified peer counselors could assist with. So CPCs will assist individuals and families in developing their own recovery goals. They provide individual or group peer support. One of the things that I want to tell you guys before I move on and like really get into this is that if you have different sources of funding that require different types of documentation, I would really, I would make all documentation be one way. Like if it needs to be super robust because of Medicaid, I would actually make it all be that way, because it's going to be confusing for people who are actually doing the documentation to understand what funding stream is paying for what part, right? And so if you have foundational community supports, you're going to have one type of documentation. You can't get away with anything else. If you have Medicaid, you have to have one type of documentation. But if you have grants, United Way, or if you have donations, then the documentation isn't going to be as important, as central to the services, because it's not going to be connected to the billing. But I highly recommend having a standardized way of documenting peer support, no matter what the funding stream is. So certified peer counselors can provide individual or group support in treatment centers or within the community. There's nothing that says that you can't go sit in a coffee shop and just meet with people and bill for that. Certified peer counselors work in various settings, such as behavioral health agencies, substance use treatment programs, hospitals, crisis teams, libraries. Certified peer counselors, a part of their job is to provide scheduled activities that promote recovery, self-advocacy, developing natural supports. That's really important in certified peer counseling, especially when working with youth and families. But I think natural supports are important for everybody. Maintenance of community living skills. Services provided by CPCs to the individual are offered in the person's individualized service plan. And so this plan has their goals. So the ISP, so this is where the golden thread comes in. It starts with the assessment. And so you get assessed in a behavioral health agency, and then you get a ISP, which is a goal plan or a service plan. And then the services that you receive have to reflect what the assessment says in the individualized service plan. And every note that's written by a certified peer counselor or anybody else has to relate to one of the goals that's on that individualized service plan. And all of the goals that are on that individualized service plan have to relate to the reason why the individual was approved for services in the first place. And this is strictly within a behavioral health agency. So this might not resonate with some of you guys yet. Some of you guys are pre-licensed. Some of you guys aren't going to want to do the whole behavioral health agency thing. But just to let you know that you have to write notes that are directly related to the goals that are on the individual service plan. Otherwise, it would be considered Medicaid fraud. And it's very fixable. At any time, you can add goals or say that goals have been completed on the individual service plan, but you want to keep that documentation up to date in case you get an audit. Now, audit was the word that I was looking for a little while ago that I couldn't find. You want to make sure that all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed if you get any kind of audits from any of the funding sources that you have. So supervision, we've talked about this a little bit. Certified peer counselors provide services to Medicaid enrolled individuals under the consultation, facilitation, and supervision of a chemical dependency professional, which we now call substance use disorder professional or mental health professional, MHP. And the caveat here is that in all of the guidance, it says that the supervisor must understand recovery. It's one of the qualifications to even be able to supervise a peer. And I think we only have Muckleshoot on here, but there's a different type of reimbursement rate for tribes. And like I said earlier in the training, we've worked with Lower Elwha, Klamath, with Muckleshoot, with Lummi Nation, with Quileute, Makah, Puyallup, So we've worked with several tribes and trained many people on certified peer counseling. And when I was a clinical director at Capital Recovery Center before I started working at Washington State University and working on curriculum and providing these trainings to people. And I was horrified when in 2013, remember, certified peer counseling started in 2005. Not one tribe was offered a certified peer counseling training until 2013. And the first tribe that actually got a full 5-day CPC training just for them was Lower Elwha Klamath. And they were able to do that because they had a SAMHSA grant and they wanted to bring in the certified peer counseling training. Now they had lots of recovery coach trainings, lots of opportunities to do recovery coach trainings. However, that is not that tends to not be, number one, it's not Medicaid reimbursable, right? And number two, the supervision requirements aren't there either. So it's more of an informal service modality, as recovery coaching is, way more informal than certified peer counseling. All right, so licensing. This is where we're going to talk a little bit about licensing. So the Department of Health, not the Healthcare Authority, the Department of Health has oversight over licensed behavioral health agencies and has been in discussion with the Healthcare Authority to prepare for the added benefit of substance use disorder peer services. So, so even now this is difficult right now because when you look at the services that are available, it will say mental health. They were supposed to change that like this year, but I'll have to go back in and see if it's changed. But even though we started offering substance use disorder certified peer counseling services and supports in 2019, there still isn't a code for it, and it's not offered as a license. Only mental health certified peer counseling is actually offered as a license right now. Now, I'm gonna have to go back and triple check that because I haven't checked that in a couple of months. But my understanding is the last time I was working, and I think I was working with Muckleshoot and Julia Joyce, we went in to look to see if they had, the Department of Health had added that certified peer counselor SUD license. Hey, Vicki, did you guys get licensed under mental health or did you guys get licensed under substance use disorder CPC?
We're both, I believe, but I know, I remember what you were talking about. There was some letter. I know exactly what you're talking about. So I don't know the answer to that as far as that being added onto it or changed.
Okay, so thank you for saying that. So my advice to everybody is just, if you want to go in and become a behavioral health agency, just get that mental health CPC license because the billing is the same. And the Department of Health and the Healthcare Authority is really understanding because it's their fault that they don't have the substance use disorder CPC licensure actually up there yet. Now, a lot of that has to do with COVID and some other things that have gotten in the way of that. So in order to get a license, you need to go to the Department of Health website. Oh, hey, Renita, is your hand up?
Yeah, so I'm seeing you explaining this, so you may be about to answer my question right now. So if you're certified peer counselor, you can be licensed now to be a certified peer counselor?
That's a great question. We don't have an individual license for certified peer counselors. Certified peer counselors have to be licensed through what's called an affiliated agency. And affiliated agency is a tribe, a hospital, a behavioral health agency. Anybody that has a license to practice behavioral health services through the Department of Health would be considered an affiliated agency. And so I'm gonna actually go, I think I'm gonna stop sharing here really quick. And then I'm gonna bring you guys to the Department of Health website.
Steph, while you're doing that, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
I am not aware of, and I think it would be really beneficial, are hospitals across the state of Washington adding certified peer counselors to their staff, or you're talking about a behavioral or a psychiatric hospital?
Really good question. So Providence is actually adding certified peer counselors to many of the divisions that they have. And we also have True Blood and forensic peer support that go into inpatient hospitals and jails and provide peer support. That's Medicaid reimbursable peer support and state reimbursable peer support through those programs.
Yeah, I think I was thinking more of a medical hospital, like we have Cadillac here for all your medical needs. And would that type of hospital, that might be similar to your Providence that you're referring to, but I don't think any of our medical hospitals, just where you would go to get your kidney surgery or your heart surgery or ICU, none of those hospitals have CPC that I'm aware of here.
Oh.
But I'm going to be calling them up.
Seriously, because I mean, think about the one thing that I would love to see is just to get certified peer counselors in the waiting rooms at hospitals and in the ERs.
Yeah,
it would create so much calm and peace. And I believe that it would cut down on the violence.
Absolutely, me too.
So I'm gonna get to the Department of Health website just a second.
Cindy, just real quick, that's been a struggle of mine and something that I would have loved, that I've been wanting to see for many years here at Cadillac and Trios.
Yeah,
Stephanie, Cindy and I have worked together and known each other for quite a few years. Cindy, unfortunately, still this day, even with the size of Cadillac Hospital, my phone will ring at 2 o'clock in the morning from their case managers just because they
need help.
Yeah, yeah, they need help.
Well, thanks for the work that you do, Jason, in all areas.
Right back at you.
Thanks.
I love that. That's so great. You guys, we couldn't do this work without each other. Like, we need that warm handoff, that referral. We need more opportunities to create relationships with each other, to talk about the different types of programs and services that we have so that we're not reinventing the wheel. Vicki, is your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to make mention one of our peer teams have actually launched with one of our area hospitals. We received funding through Beacon Health Options for our peers in the hospital program. And so it's been quite a process. The hospital has been so excited. They've wanted us in when we started this whole process, and I believe it was 2019. And we just finally got some of our peers badged, and they're now actually going into the hospital. They're currently in the mode of being, they're shadowing the internal peer that's there for Lifeline, just kind of learning their process and whatnot. But one of the biggest barriers that we've had, which is so crazy because the whole idea of being a peer is lived experience, but the process, the onboarding process at the hospital has been a big issue because of, quote, colorful backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, that's just begun with us, but we've had to just be a little bit more, creative and dealing with the barrier of not being able to have all of our peers going because they have, they wouldn't clear the background check. So we've got we're calling them point peers going into the hospitals and then doing a handoff to peers when the patients are discharged. So I just want to add that to the conversation about the hospital stuff.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Cindy, do you have any questions for Vicki about that program?
Well, it's awesome. I think it's so cool that you guys have done that. I, like Jason, we have struggled so much for people trying to get even someone into a psych hospital, and the parents being unsure and the ERs being unsure of what to do with these parents that are, so concerned about their youth. And sometimes as parents, there's some even more issues that get created because of their uncertainty of what's happening. So if you had somebody there for a psych thing or for a medical procedure as an adult, especially during COVID, when I had all my medical stuff and going into surgery, I was there by myself, and the good thing is I wasn't really there, but I'm, afraid of a needle. So if I would have known everything that was going on, how scary that is. And to be able to use your experiences or what someone else has shared has really impacted them is so beneficial. And Vicki, I might try to connect with you and talk with you about some of the things that, have become of using CPCs in the hospital setting.
Yeah, absolutely, Cindy. I can put my contact information in the chat for you.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, so I'm going to run you guys through. We're going to roll through this website so I can familiarize you guys with it. The links, I want you to look, if you look under the particular slide in this training called licensing, look in the note section. You will have, there's like 3 full pages of links and notes and RCWs that relate to licensing, agency affiliation and things like that. So first of all, I want to talk about who is an approved agency, an affiliated agency. So as defined in the WAC, agencies, so right here, so let's look at the WAC first of all. So agencies, facilities, federally recognized Indian tribes located within the state or county that can employ agency affiliated counselors. Washington departments and agencies listed in the agency and commission and organization directory, federally recognized tribes, counties as listed in the RCW, community and technical colleges governed by Washington state. So there's a whole other thing that we're doing is we're actually creating a college course, peer. It's a 250-hour college course on peer support that's connected with a 1,500-hour apprenticeship. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Don't let me forget to talk about that because that's one of the coolest things we're doing right now. But so let me make this a little bit bigger. So community colleges, colleges and universities, hospitals licensed under the RCW 7041, home and healthcare agencies, home care agencies and hospice care agencies licensed under chapter 70.127. Now, what are you guys, what's the RCW that you guys are licensed under? Jason, do you know? Sorry, I keep putting you on the spot.
Sorry, I was muted. No, that's just fine, Stephanie. So the individual housing operators themselves don't require a license unless they are a level 3 or level 4 home, and that license would come from DOH, Department of Health. Usually that is something that is reserved for inpatient treatment providers that have might have part of their model a housing attachment to it. But I believe there's only a total of 8 of them in all of Washington state.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you. That's fascinating. So that was the WAC on the affiliated agency. So now I want you guys to keep in mind that this only has to do with Medicaid reimbursable substance use disorder and mental health certified peer counseling. And so in order to be able to work at a behavioral health agency, you need to have, so I'm going to show you guys the application. All right, here we go. So I'm going to do the agency affiliated application. So a behavioral health agency that is recognized as an agency affiliated agency has to write a letter saying, or it's just fill out a part of this application saying that you either have you have an internship offer or a job offer. And this is, if you are a certified peer counselor, you know what this is. This is the application that actually will grant you the license. Once you take the 5-day training and pass the exam, you have a certification. You're certified as a certified peer counselor. You are not licensed as a certified peer counselor to work under Medicaid in the state of Washington until this application has gone through. Now, this contains a background check. This has to have the letter from, let's look at this. I want to make sure that you guys can see it. So you're going to fill out this whole application. You need to be employed or have been offered an employment by an agency. It has to be on the recognized state list that we just looked at. We want to know some military questions. There's an application fee. There's some demographic questions. Just some personal data, counseling services, other licenses that you might have. But what I want to show you is the actual application itself, which, so are you currently employed? Is the agency on the list? Here's the demographic information, personal data questions. The cool thing about what Vicki was talking about, which I'll show you guys the PDF. When we first started the certified peer counseling piece, people with felonies, the Department of Health was going back 7 years. And if you had a felony within 7 years, you weren't going to be able to work as a CPC. Then they changed it to 5 years. Then they changed it to 3 years. And now I believe it's 1 year that they'll go back if it's a drug-related charge that's related to your current recovery. And so this is the biggest thing that I like people to pay attention to when they're filling out this. When you fill this out, you go straight to your certified peer counselor manual and you just list all of the different subjects that you learned in that manual. Because if you haven't practiced as a certified peer counselor before, you're not going to have a theory, you're not going to have a practice, you're not going to have like a theoretical model that you practice by like cognitive behavioral therapy, because it's not clinical. The only thing that certified peer counselors use is their lived experience. I'm going to go back to the Department of Health website. Here we go. So now this is under current topics, and this is information for providers whose credentials have been affected by a drug conviction. And that probably has to do with what's called the RAMP program. And just as, I'm not going to go to that, but I just wanted you guys to know that in the beginning, there's a program called the RAMP program for doctors and nurses and pharmacists who like have drug-related crimes that they have like prescribed themselves, or that they have been caught like misusing or over prescribing medication. And in order to not have criminal charges against them and to lose their livelihood for the rest of their life, they can go through this 5-year RAMP program. And certified peer counselors back in the day had to go through that full 5-year program, even though they had not committed a crime. This is how backwards people were thinking about peer support when it first started. Like you were being treated like a criminal, even though all of you've done the time, you might have done the crime, but you did the time, and you have all of the information from all of the courts that you've been associated with. You hand it into the Department of Health, and then they used to put you on this 5-year program. And I'm so happy to let you guys know that that doesn't happen anymore, and they only go back 1 year. Any questions? Renita, oh, Kristen?
Yeah, I have a.
Oh, Renita, then Kristen, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay, so my organization is a peer-run organization, and like I said, one of our pathway to helping our community members to employment is volunteering as a certified peer with our organization. So to use that for an example, can our agency be an agency affiliate to assist them to becoming a certified peer counselor with Washington State, taking the exam and so forth, but now going through the Department of Licensing as an affiliate, agency affiliate, and we are a peer-run organization. How would that work for us? Because I'm a certified peer counselor. I have a background, a bachelor's degree in rehabilitation services and counseling. And how can I become an agency affiliate?
So in order to become an agency affiliated agency, you have to get a license and become a behavioral health agency, unless you're a tribe or a hospital or any of those things that we just went through. And so what that means is that you go to the Department of Health, you get a license, you decide what services you want to provide. Each service has its own separate license. And honestly, Vicki has done this recently. And so you might want to connect with her and find out exactly how she did it. And maybe she can teach you some of the things to avoid. I like to have agencies that we've mentor other agencies. And I like to have tribes mentor other tribes because their needs are so unique and different. Kristen.
Vicki, can you put your information in the chat if you're okay with me connecting with you? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. I had sent it directly to Cindy, but I will just send it to everybody.
You just put it out there.
Everybody. Okay.
Thank you. Stephanie, so if a person were to have so I was a registered nurse and my license was suspended years and years ago. I never followed through and got my license back and don't have a desire to do that. And that was through the state of Washington. Would that prevent me at all from, there was no criminal charges of any sort. It was not for drug related crimes or anything. Would that prevent me from becoming a certified peer counselor?
Not at all. First of all, it depends. There's a statute of limitations. But also if there was no crime or anything and you just let it lapse, then that doesn't affect you. So I had a LISWA license for several years because I was going to be a therapist and get my LISW. And then I changed my mind and I just kept my peer support credential up and running. And they don't, unless you've been convicted of hurting a vulnerable adult or a vulnerable child, the Department of Health is really interested in working with you because we are desperate for behavioral health workers in the field right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. I'm going to do a time check. What time do we have right now?
11:34.
11:34. So why don't we go until 12 and then we'll take a half-hour lunch from 12 to 12:30 and then we'll come back and we'll finish it up. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, it's gone by really fast already. Okay, so in contracting for services, you're going to be working, this is a brand new thing, you're going to be working with MCOs. If you choose to become a behavioral health agency, go to the Department of Health, get the license, choose the types of programs that you want to provide, including peer support, then what you start to do is you'll start to negotiate with the managed care organizations. Now, this can be an extremely daunting process for a smaller behavioral health agency, but the managed care organizations are required by the healthcare authority to negotiate with people with agencies that are behavioral health agencies. And usually the bigger agencies will have medication management, they'll have nurses, doctors, they'll have inpatient, outpatient, all sorts of things. But some of you guys are probably just gonna wanna do a peer support program, right? And so that is gonna cost less money, that has less upkeep and things like that, but you still have to go through all of the same licensing and practices and audits that the larger behavioral health agencies go through. And on that licensing slide in the notes section, it'll show you everything you need to do to become a behavioral health agency, a facility. There's a facilities part, and then there's a program part. And most of what you guys are going to need to do if you choose to become a behavioral health agency is to create policies and procedures, which I think most agencies would say was probably the most daunting, like most complicated for them. But we have several agencies around Washington State that are very happy to loan out and to give as examples policies and procedures, especially for their peer support programs. But Valley Cities has offered to give any agency their policies and procedures who want to become behavioral health agencies, or if you just want their peer support policies. We work really closely with them, and they're very happy to share those, which is really huge. And it's a big kudos to Valley Cities and Lisa Brown, who works at Valley Cities, for getting that to happen. Because a lot of times it takes a lot of money, usually upwards of about $20,000, to create policies and procedures specifically geared to the agency and to the services that the agency is providing. You guys won't have that huge problem because you're not going to be doing a ton of services. If you just do peer support, you're just going to need policies and procedures for your peer support program. So in the curriculum, we train on recovery principles, telling your story, trauma-informed peer support, ethics and boundaries, cultural competency, goal setting, and documentation. And I'm really glad that we're going to get to the documentation. So anybody here use SOAP notes or DAP notes to document any of the services that you guys provide right now? Okay. Vicki, what kind of documentation, what kind of notes do you guys write?
We actually have an electronic healthcare record. Yeah, we're using ReliaTracks.
Okay.
Danira is our amazing biller, and she might be able to respond more to that.
That would be great. So how did you guys, so since a lot of people aren't where you guys are at, how do you guys research? So anytime you guys are having Medicaid reimbursable services, you have to have an information system that is encrypted, that protects CFR 42 and protects Hipaa. How did you guys start looking for an information system, and how expensive was it, and how hard or easy was it to get up and running?
Well, I really left it to our team, primarily the counselors, because they're the ones who are going to be using it. There in the beginning, there was a discussion between two electronic health records, and we had both of them do like demos to our teams, so we could make a decision on what was going to best fit our needs. And then we ended up with the one that we have, and they've been really great to work with. So several of our team members have worked with them individually for whatever needs that we have. So like Katie is, you remember Katie on our team? Yeah, she's, I have her working with their programmers and such, just to create what's needed for our peers. And so, like I said, Danira might have more to talk about the billing system that we actually use and how that works with documentation and the billing piece of it. But we did end up going with ReliaTracks because they're the ones, their system was so user-friendly. Our counselors loved it. It was created by counselors in the first place. And so I really let that process be inclusive with the team.
That's fantastic. ReliaTracks. So there's so many different information systems. You really go on a shop around. There are even companies that have bought information systems that don't work for them anymore, but they are still stuck with them, and they can sell those licenses for half price to upcoming agencies that want to just maybe try it out, but they don't want to spend $50,000 on a new information system. And so be creative and talk to, go ahead. Was someone trying to talk?
I think someone just wasn't on mute.
Oh, okay. All right. No problem.
Yeah.
So let's talk about documentation. When we talk about documentation, we're talking about duration, frequency, and outcome. Duration, how long did you meet with the person? Frequency, how often are you meeting with the person? Outcome, what was the outcome of the intervention that you provided that as it relates to the goal, the individual service plan? Remember, so somebody comes in the door of a behavioral health agency, a clock starts ticking. They do something called a request for services. And I always recommend that an agency do the demographics at the same time that they do the request for services, because you're not going to get paid for requests for services, but you can get reimbursed for demographics. So, and once you get the demographic, once you get the reason why the person wants to be seen, set up an appointment with them to get an assessment. Once they get the assessment and they determine what their needs are, then either the mental health professional or the substance use disorder professional will send that off to get approved. It's usually provider one or something like that. The approval comes back, then an individual service plan is created for the person based on their needs and based on what they were approved, what services they were approved for. Then you create those goals to reach the reach the desired outcome of recovery for the individual. And so you have this individual service plan, and then you have a substance use disorder professional, then you have a peer support, and then maybe you have a case manager. Each one of those individuals has to be working with the individual on a specific goal on the individual service plan, and the documentation has to specifically relate to one of those goals. And again, it's easy to add a goal, but if you're working with someone as a peer and they have 3 goals, right? Education, housing, and employment, but they want to start talking about health and weight, and that goal is not on the service plan, you want to make sure that you get it on the service plan as soon as possible so that they can start working on that goal, so that you as an agency can get reimbursed for that work. If you work with somebody on a goal that's not on the individual service plan, again, you might not get reimbursed for that. There's a lot of things that could happen up to and including Medicaid fraud challenges. And you just don't want to do that. You don't want to be billing for services that people weren't approved to receive. And it's a really easy fix. And a good clinician or clinical director can help you guys navigate that. And again, you guys are going to be having smaller, you guys might not want to do the BHA route, right? I don't see recovery houses hiring substance use disorder professionals just for the sole purpose of supervising peers. But you could borrow some hours, or you could pay for some supervisory hours for a peer. Like, there's lots of different ways we can quilt this together, right? And again, remember the hub and spoke model that I was talking about. You know, if you're in Thurston County and you want certified peer counselors or recovery coaches, you could go talk to Stephanie Tompkins at Peer Olympia, create a contract, and you could have those peer support specialists be working in your recovery houses, right? And that would just be a matter of an agreement or a service agreement or a contract. Now, one of the main points of documentation for Medicaid reimbursable certified peer counseling is the fact that the certified peer counselor needs to use a part of their story in the intervention, because that's what the intervention is. It's peer support. Peer support means that I'm using my lived experience to help you on your recovery journey. So if I'm helping, say, Cindy get some community needs met, or say I'm gonna help Cindy learn how to ride a bus. So I'm going to, and that's the goal. I need to write about how I use my lived experience of having to learn how to ride a bus back in the day in order to help her feel more comfortable, bring hope into every interaction, create that connection. It's all about hope, recovery, resiliency, and connection with peer support. That's why it's so effective. But we really, really, really want to emphasize how to properly document Medicaid certified peer counseling within that record. Any questions? Hold on a sec. All right, great. Okay, cool. So, so when I do this training in person, I have a toolkit and we talk about licensing and reimbursement, and we talk about the recovery culture. One of the things that's really important is if you're going to have a peer support program, whether it's community peer support, Medicaid reimbursable, or grant-based or whatever, it has to be based on recovery culture. And recovery, you're in recovery when you say you are. And one of the things that I really like to emphasize is just be careful of some of the certified peer counselors that are really steeped in 12-step programs, because sometimes they think that's the only way. And there can be a little bit of judgment and a little bit of, this is only my personal experience with people in 12-step programs, is that sometimes they aren't open to many ways up the mountain. And we start that philosophy at the very first day of the very first training of certified peer counseling. You're in recovery when you say you are. There's many ways up the mountain. There's a celebrate recovery. There's Buddhist 8 steps. There is 12-step. But not every, not every program fits for every person, and we want to provide individualized, tailored care, right? And so you want to make sure that the certified peer counselors that you hire have a really good understanding of the other types of recovery programs that are out there and available, but you want to make sure that they are in recovery. If they say they are, you want to be able to ask them what that looks like in the interview. And you don't want to say, what does your recovery look like? But you want to say, you want to have interview questions like, what does self-care look like for you? What does, how do you take care of your recovery when you're on your off time, right? You're going to ask the certified peer counselor the same types of questions that you're going to ask anybody else that you're hiring. Some of the roles of peer support is what do peer specialists do? We're definitely not therapists. We're not clinical. We provide hope. We promote self-empowerment, enhance the quality of life. What are some of the roles that you guys think, I'm gonna stop sharing here. So what are some of the roles that you guys can see right now after we've gone through the first half of this training? Where would peer support be great in the places where you guys work? Where can you see peer support now where you might not have been able to see it before? Or opposite, you think, oh, wow, I was thinking this might work, but it might not. Carol, you were one of the first people that you used Daphnos, like, great. So how do you guys think you can utilize certified peer counselors in housing? I'm gonna start calling on people. How about you, Kristen?
So, I believe that for our residents that come in, especially when they first come into the home and, they're taking the steps to, establish primary health care, to establish, dental care, to work the court systems. I mean, honestly, just having someone that's been through those processes of picking up their life and putting the pieces back together, be like, hey, I'm here. This is what I'm doing. I mean, I know that that's really general, Stephanie, and maybe you were asking for more specifics, but I just believe that that's exactly, what we do as peers is we just, walk alongside someone in those things. And, especially for a lot of the women that come into the home, there's a lot of trauma that, and for everyone, not just women, but I work directly with women. So, but there can be a lot of trauma. And I mean, walking down the street by themselves can be traumatic, right?
Yeah.
So to have somebody to walk down the street with them and, And so in general, that's where I see peer support coming in, playing a role in our recovery residents here.
I love it. And is there anybody here from Oxford houses? Does anybody understand, or have you guys ever felt that awkward first night at an Oxford house where everybody knows each other and they're clicking off, and you know you have somebody that's a representative of the house and they're supposed to help you, and they do to an extent, but it's definitely not peer support. It's like, these are the rules, and if you drink, you're kicked out, and you're, you know, like rah, rah, rah. It's pretty punitive in the beginning, and I believe that there's a huge place for peer support in Oxford houses to like smooth out some of those rough edges for the first couple of nights, and some of that fear of relapse can be discussed with a certified peer counselor a lot more comfortably than maybe it could be somebody who doesn't have the training or background of a CPC.
Stephanie, one of the ways in which I could see, Kristen said it, like literally walk beside them, especially when they first come in. But there's a group that would be fabulous at that, or that's an opportunity. Those that have been there for a while, and so maybe I'd been there for 4 or 5 months and I feel like I know the ropes, and what do I need to do? And is there like, so you aren't brand new, but you still don't know all the things that are possibilities, or how to connect to this or do that. So having it at that level, and then also someone that has maybe graduated or moved on to another living situation, whatever that is, to be able to come back and say, look, you know, this works, that these are some things I did towards the end that was really helpful and beneficial to me to get ongoing housing and other life situations. So I think there's just like, there's 3 levels of ways in which the peers could help and benefit other residents, or what staff or whoever you're referring to at the housing facility.
I love it. I agree. Danira, do you have your hand up? Ooh.
Hi, everyone. Hello. So I Exchange also is a host agency for the Parents for Parents program. We support families, parents that are going through dependency court who have had their children removed. And we see how it could just really change the trajectory of the case when they have somebody sharing their experience with them. One thing that I haven't seen yet is somebody to walk alongside people in like criminal court or different things like that, where it's like, I feel like that's definitely something that can feel very lonely, can feel like the whole world is against you, and to have peer support in that area, I think would really change outcomes, you know, and now that the courts are seeing like people who get DOSA, who get drug court or mental health court, things like that, having somebody in those courts would, as a peer.
I think we lost you. Dang it. But we do have, that would be a fantastic next training for you guys. There is a lady named Heather Sturdivant who runs our rural peer support network, but she also works in the Thurston County Jail. And we have veterans court, we have mental health court, and we have substance use drug court. And they currently have peers in each of those courts in Thurston County. And they're there when people go to court, they're there when they graduate, and they're there to help like create that soft landing from all of these rules that you have to follow and all these things. And as you move away from the charges and as you integrate into your recovery and back into the community, it can be really, really lonely. And you lose all your friends and you don't want to go back to the old ways, but you don't have anybody to connect with. And that's where I think peer support can really make a difference. And I think community peer support works best in the specialty courts, but there are some examples of those programs. And we could have people come on here and talk about how they set them up, how they work, what they look like, and how effective they are, if that would be of interest to you guys. I don't run this training show, so I'm just making suggestions. Sorry, Jason and Brianna.
No, they're all wonderful. They're all wonderful suggestions, Stephanie. I'm taking fast and furious notes. It's our goal here at Walker to offer the innovative stuff out there that's ultimately going to help all of our providers.
Yeah, definitely. So any other questions before, or any other ideas about the role? That there's just, the sky's the limit. I just wanted you guys to know that the sky's the limit of the role that a certified peer counselor or a peer support specialist could hold within the housing recovery community. And I think that housing is so important. And even if somebody was in a house and they relapsed, and for whatever reason they had to leave that house, still remaining connected to a peer support specialist would help them get back on the beam faster. It would help them with their get back. You know, there's just so much in the 12-step world that disconnects people and cuts people off right away. And it can seem really harsh looking in to an outsider, but if we can keep that peer support connection and to just let people know that we love them and we care about them, and that people make mistakes, and just because you can't be in this program right now doesn't mean that we're going to cut you loose. You still have support from the peer support specialist. You'll still be able, and when you're ready, right? Because we know that sometimes people just aren't ready, right? You can lead a horse to water all you want. If they're not ready to drink, I've got 10 other horses that I need to lead to water right now, right? And so I understand that philosophy as well, but we always want to make sure that that connection remains open and that door remains open, and certified peer counseling is one of the absolute best ways to do that and to keep that connection. We're losing too many people to recidivism, relapse. People are going out, they're relapsing and they're dying because the drugs are different. They don't have the same tolerance as they had when they went into jail, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so you guys can, obviously I can talk about this forever. And so we're gonna take a half-hour break, come back at 12:30, and we will finish up the rest of the PowerPoint, and then I will do some technical assistance pieces for the last part of the training. Any questions before we go? All right, thank you guys. This has been great.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll see you in a half hour. Hi, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. Why don't you guys do me a favor and raise your hand if you guys are back from lunch? I don't want to start before everybody gets back. And I know we just took a, thank you, Carol. Get the roll call going. Great. How was lunch, everybody? Junia's here, Vicky's here, Kristen's here. Brianna's here. Did we lose Jason?
Yes, he had another meeting he had to go to, so.
Okay, no problem. All right, so when we last left off, we were talking about the different roles that certified peer counselors and recovery coaches can have in our housing, in your guys's in the recovery housing world. And just like in any behavioral health agency, there's a lot of roles for peer support in housing. Hey, Kristen, is your hand up? Do you have a question?
Sorry, no, I hadn't taken it down from.
Okay, no problem at all. All right. Okay, so these are just more roles. I just can't tell you how many different ways that peer support can help somebody. But the main concept of peer support is that they've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, they're hope bringers, and they walk alongside people. They don't walk in front of them. We when we talk about advocacy, we talk about teaching people how to advocate instead of advocating for people. This is a wonderful technical assistance book. And again, we're going to be sending you this out. But this is a provider's handbook on developing and implementing peer roles. And I want you guys to specifically pay attention to the housing section. There's a couple housing chapters, and they talk about different housing programs across the country that have implemented peer support roles. It talks about housing, employment, court advocacy, just kind of like what we were talking about earlier, community integration, SSI, SSDI claims, adult living skills, relationship buildings, bringing hope, the list goes on and on. There's also a peer book. So this is the provider handbook. And then there's also a peer handbook on how to implement that's written and implemented from a peer perspective. Peer support is everywhere. It's in primary care, it's in substance use, the WAC. So for those of you guys who are interested in providing peer support, here's some of the guidance around programming. Like we talked about, must be an agency affiliated counselor to bill Medicaid, have to be Hipaa and CFR 42 compliant. You guys, one of the things that I just skipped over this in the documentation training portion earlier is that the difference between Medicaid and non-Medicaid certified peer counseling is that if you're being reimbursed by Medicaid, you are automatically a mandated reporter and you automatically have something called duty to warn. So if somebody is talking to you, you're providing peer support to somebody and they say, I'm just going to kill that person at the housing authority, or I'm just getting right. Like that is an automatic mandatory report. And so you might not want that level of heaviness of interaction between folks. And so your funding streams and how you support your programming is going to determine the level of basically micromanagement that you're going to have within the relationship between the peer and the person receiving the peer services. Definitely have to abide by sexual misconduct regulations. Supervision has to be done by a substance use disorder professional or a mental health professional. And if you're providing group, say you guys want to do like a housing group or something, a certified peer counselor can run a group up to 12 people. But if there's 13 people, there has to be a supervisor present. And the maximum number of any group in the state of Washington for substance use disorder or mental health is 24. You cannot ever have more than 24 people in a group. And if you try to bill for 25, the billing will cut off at 24. So ethical standards apply to agency affiliated counselors and therefore certified peer counselors, and all the trainings that a certified peer counselor gets, and it has to be equal to all the training that any other employee gets. Certified peers need to be invited to all staff meetings, all the same meetings. They need to have all of the opportunities that any other staff would have. And this is a little bit more about the state plan amendment, which we just want to emphasize that peer support services provided by peer counselors to Medicaid enrolled individuals under the consultation, facilitation, or supervision of a substance use disorder professional who understands rehabilitation and recovery. There are several states around the country that actually have a 20 to 28 hour training. It's like a 20-hour training that all supervisors who are eligible to supervise peers have to take. Washington State doesn't have that requirement, but like Florida does, Kentucky does. In order to be able to supervise peers in other states, you actually have to have some special training. And most of it's around recovery, resiliency. Do you believe that? I would hate to be supervised by somebody who didn't believe in recovery or didn't believe in like second chances or understanding certain particular parts of my recovery or my personality. That would be really hard on top of having the challenges that I have, on top of doing the hard work that we do, right? It's really important to have a good supervisor that understands. The progress notes are going to document all the individual progress. Remember what I was talking about: frequency, duration, and outcome. Peer counselors work with their peers, adults and youth and families. They draw on their own experience to help peers find and make progress towards their recovery goals. Again, this is where I think it really applies to you. Peer support can be done in community settings, and it's often most effective in community settings. It's really important when you're hiring to make sure that the person that you're hiring understands that they're kind of a role model and that they have to have their own self-care plan and understand how to self-manage and reach their own rehabilitative goals, their own recovery goals. And so, let's see here. So this is where I like to talk about myths and facts. Do you guys have any myths about peer support specialists? Is there anything, some of the myths in this Yale article are like, the administrative side of the work is going to be too difficult for certified peer counselors. And the fact is actually quite the opposite. There, number one, there's accommodations that can be created. There's drag and speak. You can speak your notes. But generally, certified peer counselors they're fine taking notes. They just need the opportunity to learn how to do it the correct way, like everybody else. I don't know anybody who's a counselor, a therapist, or a doctor or a nurse that automatically knew how to take notes. You don't, no matter what your degree is. Note-taking is a very specialized educational process, and it has to be tailored to the individuals where they work, because each agency has a different way of documenting. Go ahead, Cindy.
Well, I was just thinking when I started through the peer support program, I initially had done the consumer to provider program. And when I got back to Spokane, some of the agencies were, well, actually there was only Spokane Mental Health at that time and not all the other agencies are now, but wanting to say, well, what if they come in our conference or our employee lunchroom, what are we supposed to do? We're not going to be able to talk. What if we say something about a client and they hear us? And I mean, there was just so much, kind of misinformation and myths built up around who peers are, we're required to provide the same type of Hipaa and confidentiality and CFR and all those things. But it's just sort of interesting that when it first started, I mean, the nitty gritty of, I don't want them in our conference room, or I don't want them in my lunchroom. So I hope a lot of things have changed since that time.
Totally. So I've stopped sharing just so that we can have this myths and facts discussion. So another myth is that, well, it's not as much of a myth. It's a question that I ask people, particularly in behavioral health agencies. So this is what supervisors ask me. I've got this question over and over again. What do I do if the peer gets sick? Right? What do I do? And do you guys know what the answer to that question is?
Same thing you do for everyone.
Exactly, Cindy. You know, if we were in person, I'd give you a prize. Yay! You get a prize, you get a prize. But exactly, you do, it's the same thing that you would do for anybody. I was over in Spokane, Kristen, I love that you're laughing. I was over in Spokane and they were starting to integrate certified peer counselors into their involuntary commitment teams. And at one of the larger agencies, one of the peers did get sick and really, really upset the nursing staff. One of the peers actually got triggered during an emergency and they left their post and they didn't come back until the next day. They didn't call anybody or tell anybody. And so the nursing staff got really, really upset and didn't have a whole lot of empathy and support for the peer. But now that peer was by themselves. They didn't have a buddy. They hadn't been trained. And up until that point, you know what they had been asking them to do? They hadn't been doing peer support at all. They'd been filing. So that in no way, shape, or form were they even prepared. They hadn't even been providing peer support to the people on the unit under great circumstances. There's no way that they would have known, nor had they been trained properly, which everybody needs to be trained properly. I don't care if you're a doctor or a nurse, peer support, or a therapist. There's very specific circumstances when you're an ENT, right? There's very specific things that can happen and very specific rules and protocols. But one of the myths is that there's going to be more Hipaa violations. In fact, that's not true at all. There's probably going to be less. We talked about that earlier. There's, what do you do if somebody gets sick? You do the same thing if anybody else gets sick. Oh, peers aren't going to be able to handle the administrative side of the job. Yeah, they will. They just need to be trained, right? And also, one of the things that I really, really like to hit on when I'm talking about building peer support programs is your hiring practices. So, you know, I talk to a lot of agencies that are like, oh, we thought this peer was going to be perfect, and they're not doing their job at all. And what had happened is that they had a pet peer that had made it through their program and was like a shining star, but didn't really have any desire to be a certified peer counselor. They just wanted to be well and be on their own. Then they got this opportunity offered to them. They went through the class, they became a certified peer counselor, and it just wasn't for them, right? And so, you know, picking people, everybody has to go through a competitive hiring process. Even the people that we think might be really great at the job might have some things that keep them from actually being the best possible choice or the best possible candidate for the agency. The other thing, so this actually relates to you guys. So if you had somebody that went through your housing program or went through your housing services and thought, man, you're going to be a great certified peer counselor, you'd be great in our peer support program. You have to make sure that all the documentation about the services that they have received, no matter what they are kept in a very separate place than the employment documents. And the team, this is particularly true for a behavioral health agency, the clinical team or the recovery team that the peer is assigned to has no access to any previous behavioral health records that that individual might have at that agency if they previously received services at that agency. Under no circumstances can a supervisor, a colleague, or anybody get into those records, and the employment records have to be kept separate than any behavioral health records. So let's see, I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So one of the biggest things is, aren't certified peer counselors too fragile to do the job? Aren't they? Don't we have to walk on eggshells around them, and don't we have to handle them with kid gloves? And the reality is absolutely not. Jobs in mental health settings and substance use settings are stressful no matter what. And self-care needs to be a focus for every single staff, not just peer staff. And with respect to fragility, people in recovery are generally considered to have shown a huge amount of persistence, resilience, and opposed to fragility. They are strong and battling back, and they have this life experience that has built this backbone of resilience for them that they can then offer this great hope and recovery to other people to help them walk through their recovery journey. And so you guys, I'm going to go, I think I have a whole PowerPoint on the CPC process that I'm going to show you guys after this PowerPoint, so we don't have to look through this. So Supervision, there's this really great book that was actually written by a BHO administrator, Jim Colvin. He was actually the director of the Chelan Douglas Regional Support Network way back in the day when regional support networks were actually called regional support networks and not BHOs, pre-integration. But he was actually the first RSN administrator to hire youth peers, and he hired 2 youth peers and he hired 2 adult peers, and he wrote a book about it, and it's called From Here to There. And it's it's a small book, it's a great read, but one of the best parts of the book is the supervision part. And he says, and I quote, "The ideal supervisor for a peer counselor is one who has worked as a peer counselor and subsequently risen to the level of supervisor. In order to implement a career ladder for peers, it might be necessary to work with local community colleges or other educational institutions to help provide the needed education for people to advance in the agency." And we're seeing a lot of that right now. We're seeing, even though there's a requirement for a substance use disorder professional or a mental health professional to actually be that clinical supervisor or to be able to provide a specific portion of the supervision, we're seeing more and more certified peer counselors, recovery coaches being promoted to leadership and supervisory roles and creating a dual supervision kind of relationship where you're getting this pure peer supervision, but you're also getting any of the mental health professional or substance use disorder supervision that you need. Now, here's some of the trainings that we recommend for continuing education. Ethics. All certified peer counselors are required to have ethics training, and there's a small amount of ethics trainings. There's about 4 hours of ethics training. We go over the basics in the actual training itself, but I highly recommend more specific trainings, particularly around ethics and documentation and the legality of the documentation. So your progress note, if you're writing a Medicaid progress note, that is a legal document, and you need to know what to put in there, what not to put in there, how you call the person that you're working with, how you refer to yourself. And all of that has to do with agency preference and the guidance in the RCWs and the WACs around Medicaid documentation. The only difference between, say, behavioral health tech or a substance use disorder professional's documentation and a certified peer counselor's documentation is that with somewhere within the documentation, you have the certified peer counselor or the peer has to articulate how they've used their lived experience in the intervention, and the intervention is peer support. Any questions about that? Okay, good. So when you guys are starting your program, you want to start with that technical assistance document I showed you a little bit earlier on the peer roles and creating a peer support program. You want to talk to everybody. You don't just talk to the clinical team. You talk to everybody about bringing on peers. You talk to everybody from the CEO to the janitor. We're bringing on certified peer counselors. This is their role. Why do you guys think you would want to talk to the janitor or secretaries or any of the gatekeepers that might be at the agency about the fact that you're bringing on certified peer counselors? Cindy, you just said it earlier. It's because what if all of a sudden, go ahead, Cindy, you're unmuted.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's just so many things. Sometimes you said gatekeeper, sometimes they might be the first interaction with somebody. And then because of the stigma and such, I think it's just a good idea to, you know, you don't have to point this person out and this person out and this person out, but just say, this is our value system, and we're going to be including peer support in this process. And then I think word of mouth, I think it's a good networking tool. So.
Absolutely. And I wanted to bring up the example that you brought up earlier this morning, which was, what if the staff are used to seeing this individual in the waiting room and not in the lunchroom, right? And all of a sudden somebody's in the lunchroom and they're not in the waiting room, and nobody's told anybody that you've hired this person. You're going to create a potentially traumatic and uncomfortable situation for the person that just got hired, and an embarrassing moment for the individual who didn't know that they got hired, right? And it happens quite often that behavioral health agencies hire people who have gone through their program and have been successful. So understanding where to store documents and how to talk to other staff about bringing on peers is really important. And then the next piece that I like to talk about is having a very clear job description and role clarification. You want to have a clear job description so that you can have a clear job announcement, and that has relevant competencies, clear policy for evaluating those competencies and job performance. Like we just said, you want to involve non-peer staff and organizational leaders so that everybody knows that you're creating this program. You want to identify, Cindy, you just said this, you want to identify and value the unique contributions that peers can make to the programs and settings where they're going to be working. And it's important that peers have jobs in which they can use the skills that they've acquired through their lived experience and training, rather than being assigned menial tasks or that other staff are too busy to perform. We've done a lot of great work on that way back in the day. Remember, we said probably between 2005 and 2010, every other peer certified peer counselor that I spoke to was doing some kind of admin tasks and hadn't even spoke to a client yet, because nobody knew what their role was. Nobody knew what they were supposed to do. And nobody knew how to like supervise them. And so like what we kind of did was we went about it a little bit backwards. This training, operationalizing peer support, should have been implemented at the very same time that we were training up all these certified peer counselors. Because what do you think happened back in the day? We created this entirely new field, never talked to the providers. And all of a sudden counselors were like, they're going to take our job. That's just a cheaper form of counseling. Like this, and so that it created this dynamic tension where there didn't have to be any, because certified peer counseling enhances the treatment and the recovery experience that somebody has if it's done correctly, right? And if it's a part of a team. And sometimes it's sort of peer support is going to be a part of a team, and sometimes it's not going to be, right? It just
literally in Eastern Washington, when the peers came and said, here I am, I want to have a job, I'm trained now. The agency said, no. You've worked here, or you got services here. No. And it might be a community that only had one provider. No, we don't have room for a peer. What is a peer? How's that? So literally this side of the state was at least 10 years behind that side of the state in implementing peer support. Just because they didn't understand the role, they didn't understand how to use them, they didn't understand the process, and it was the peers that kept getting trained, and more people getting trained when no one over here was hiring. So I'm thankful for the WISE program that started incorporating the youth partner and the family partners, and then all the agencies went, oh, okay, yeah, we see this now. But yeah, I think it really impacted the providers, but also ultimately impacted the CPCs.
It did, because what did we do? We gave them false hope, and we didn't educate anybody about what their role is. Yeah. So we, it's the worst thing I think anybody could do for anybody's recovery is provide false hope and then pull the rug out from under them. And it was nobody's fault. It was just that it wasn't fully thought out. It wasn't fully thought through. Everybody was just so happy that we got the peer support Medicaid reimbursed. They didn't think about substance use disorder CPC, and they didn't think about how are we going to actually integrate this and educate providers about the great new thing, peer support, right? So we were talking a little bit about working in the criminal justice system, and you guys, you'll get this. But here's some core competencies for peers working in the criminal justice system. Oh, let me go back. All right, so I will, that's supposed to be a link to a PDF. This is William White, and all you have to do is Google William White and draft core competencies in criminal justice settings. But I'm gonna stop sharing here because I want to share something else. I'm going to show you something that is fantastic that I recommend to all supervisors in any agency that wants to start a peer support program. It's William White, Supervisor Self-Assessment. Give me a second while I core competencies. And all of these links are going to be in the PowerPoint. Here we go. Hold on. It's not popping up. That's so weird. Okay.
Seems to be a problem with the link. I can't get in either.
Yeah, there is. You're totally right. Okay, so I'm just going to move right along. I'm going to put the PowerPoint back up, and then I will make sure that you guys get the right links to those. But if you Google William White and supervisor self-assessment, it's going to be a blue, it's a paper with a blue cover, and it has like 13 different domains of self-assessment where the supervisor will say, how do I really believe in recovery? Do I, how do I feel when somebody comes to me that I'm supervising that relapses? Like, and it's just your own self-assessment to make sure that you're really thinking all the way through becoming a supervisor of a peer. It's just a wonderful tool. Okay, and this is the certification from Florida. Let's see if this link works. All right, so this is the Certified Peer Specialist on the Job Supervision Verification Form. And here's the policies. And there's also a training.
Stephanie, if it popped up, we don't see it.
Oh, you're right. You don't see it. It did pop up. Finally, something popped up and you can't see it. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to share again. There you go. That should be. So in all places, Florida actually has some really great policies and procedures, and they also have like interstate compact agreements where if you get trained in Georgia, Louisiana, like surrounding states, they will honor that certified peer counseling license and certification from other states. Washington at this time does not have any agreements with any other states like that. But so this is, you'll be able to look at those policies when you get the PowerPoint. So I'm going to stop sharing and share again. Oh. Oh, here we go. Share screen. Thanks for All right. Through here. So we're just moving towards the end. This is actually the document that I wanted to show you guys. This is the substance use disorder peer supervision competencies. And if you, hopefully this will take us right there. Interesting. So you guys will be able to look at that. So competency 1, we talk about understanding the peer role. Does the supervisor fully comprehend substance use disorder and mental health? Do they believe that, do you believe in mental health recovery? Or do you only believe in substance use disorder recovery? Or do you believe in recovery at all? Or you just think it's a buzzword? These self-assessments are personal and private. Competency 2 talks about the recovery orientation of the supervisor. And it goes on and on and on. And so right now, I'm going to move into like reasonable accommodations and different things. We have, as we move towards the end of this training, what you guys are going to see are slides based on continuing education that we provide. I can provide a full day or half a day supervision training. We provide trainings on accommodations and what a reasonable accommodation is. We talk a lot about having strong emotional responses to being a certified peer counselor, and how a post-traumatic growth plan or a wellness recovery action plan is going to be really key for certified peer counselors to be healthy in the workplace. Again, cannot emphasize enough the importance of a great job description and a great job announcement. That's the jumping off point. And then we provide documentation. We can tailor any documentation training that you guys might need. If you do Medicaid, we can do, if you decide to go the BHA route, we can provide you with a documentation training. If you provide to go the recovery coach, we can come together and put together a training on how is it best to document recovery coaching? What does that look like? Again, you cannot get enough ethics and boundaries trainings. And we do a lot of trauma-informed workshops. We concentrate on secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, and most importantly, the 6 components of post-traumatic growth, which is where people tend to be stronger and more resilient after going through a trauma than if they had never gone through a trauma at all. Okay, so we are at the question time. I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you guys for your attention. And I just want to make sure that we covered the questions that you guys had at the beginning. Anybody have any follow-up questions? Did you guys learn something new today?
Stephanie, I was hoping you could clarify what you just said a little bit ago as far as the peer counseling and the recovery coach, the differences in that.
I would love to. In fact, I like to go a little bit further than that. I like to say, what's the difference between a sponsor in a 12-step program, a recovery coach, and a certified peer counselor? So a sponsor is voluntary, generally doesn't have any training, and is specific to a 12-step program and is indoctrinated and utilizes all of the philosophy and practices of a 12-step program. You don't get to do a background check on a sponsor. Generally, you don't, like, it's just kind of the personal agreement in a relationship. Recovery coaches have lived experience or they're affected by somebody else's experience with substance use disorder. And it's generally a more informal relationship. We get trained through CCAR, and in the state of Washington, recovery coaches are not Medicaid they're not reimbursable through Medicaid dollars. Therefore, a recovery coach is not a mandated reporter. They do not have the duty to warn. And the only exception to that, which doesn't have really basically anything to do with a recovery coach at all, but if you are hired, if you are a recovery coach and you're hired at an agency where you have to have the affiliated agency licensure for any reason, then that agency affiliation and that licensure trumps all other requirements, just as a FYI. And then, of course, certified peer counselors are Medicaid reimbursable, and they do have mandated reporting. They do have duty to warn, and they do have that really strong, strict documentation need. And so it depends on what type of recovery organization you want to create. That's going to really determine what you guys decide. Do you want to hire recovery coaches? Do you want to hire certified peer counselors? Or do you want to just make sure that they have all that training and call them something else? And again, I just want to emphasize the fact that funding is everywhere. Go to United Way, go to the Eagles, go to the Elks Clubs, go to, there's lots of money out there, especially for recovery right now and for people who are getting their lives back together. And most importantly, for housing. So if you, Wanda Johns is a colleague of mine and she works at the Healthcare Authority and Housing, and she can give you a list of 100 different places to ask for money for housing. And she would be another person that would be really good to get on here and have her do some, do you know Wanda, Brianna?
No, I don't, but she sounds like a really good resource. Jason might.
Yeah, should be a great resource. Cindy, you know Wanda, she's phenomenal.
Did she work at the mental health division or whatever it was at the time? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, she's still there. And great question. How am I conceptualizing recovery? I do not conceptualize recovery for anybody else. Recovery is a personal term, and you're in recovery when you say you are. And so I never give a definition of recovery. For me, personally, I'm in recovery when my quality of life is better than it was when back in the day, right? I just am not going to give that. Does anybody want to address that? How do you guys conceptualize recovery when you talk about this? Because there's some very specific rules and regulations around recovery. It could be abstinence-based, it could be harm reduction, it could be anything. Renita, how do you conceptualize recovery? I'm going to throw that question right back at you. Did she ask the question and run? It is getting late. It's getting late in the day.
I'm sorry, I'm not Renita. My name is Dr. Eve, and I am here as a CWCC partner. I asked the question because I know that people are recovering from traumatic events or traumatic experiences in their lives. And it's not always recovery from substance use. And so I asked the question because I don't want to limit how we view recovery when we are considering how we are taking care of individuals. So I asked the question just specifically because you all are the experts in this space, and just wanted to see how others are how are others taking care of people? Is it specifically substance use, or is it an array of recovery? Could it be domestic violence? Could it be, you see what I'm saying? Trauma is a huge subject, and people are recovering from these events in their lives.
Absolutely.
So that was my question. That was my line of questioning.
That's great. And the guidance in the state plan amendment outlines all the different ways that a certified peer counselor can help. And very few of them are specifically with mental illness. We can help. Specifically with addiction or substance use disorder, we can help. It's not that, it's like in community connection, it's housing, it's employment, it's, you know, it's a wide variety. And I think it's anything that affects the people's quality of life.
Thank you. That's what I needed to hear. Thank you so very much for that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you know, Brianna, make sure that I'll make sure that I send the state plan amendment link so that you guys can look at that, because I think that it's a really great document that opens a lot of people's eyes to how wide and broad the role and the scope and the reach of peer support is.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, send that my way and I'll send it out to everyone.
Will the recording be available? Because I love what I'm hearing and would love to go back and recap. I missed the first part of it, but would love to center this conversation a little bit more.
Yeah, so we're having it recorded. I'm going to send a link to the recording to everyone's email who registered, but it will also, we can put it on our website under the recording section. We have some previous webinars recorded, so we can post it there as well.
Awesome. Thank you for all you are doing.
Oh, thanks. Glad to have you here.
Yeah. So any other questions, any thoughts, anybody want to walk through a potential program that you guys are thinking of starting? I'm here until 2 o'clock and I'm available to talk to you guys one-on-one, and I'm available to walk through any kind of technical assistance between now and 2 that you guys might need or want. And if I don't know the answer, which is highly likely, I will find out and I'll make sure that I bring it back to you guys.
Stephanie, I like what you said about what I think the person that was using Renita's desk is I think there's kind of a danger in defining specific things, such as when someone says, well, what antidepressant am I using? I don't even like to say what medication I'm using because it might not work for you. What agency do you go to? If it's here in Benton and Franklin counties, here's the agencies and good luck. One's smaller, one's bigger. This one's been here longest. This was newest, because I think it's so individual. And yeah, it could just be recovery for a while was me getting up out of bed. Yeah. I couldn't get out of the apartment. I couldn't do anything, but I felt like I was making some steps. Someone else who couldn't see into my world would be like, why is that girl just isolating? I don't understand. So, you know, our recovery hopefully keeps growing, but we might take steps back and we might, you know, get through some areas better and then have some other areas that we need to work on recovery. So I just think there's a little bit of a danger in trying to be very prescriptive or define what recovery is, because it's whatever you make it to be. And you can share your recovery with others. And hopefully no one says to you, that's not recovery.
Yeah, and nobody gets to say to you that's not recovery. And that's a big switch. Yeah. Like, and that's what I love about the recovery coach model is that there's many ways up the mountain, and you could also be a family member or a community member that's affected, and that you're so moved that you want to become a recovery coach and help people through that. The difference also, a sponsor has lived experience in recovery, generally 12-step only. And then the recovery coach can either have lived experience themselves, they could be a family member or just be a concerned community member, and they're welcome in the class. They can take the class and become a recovery coach and help other people. And then a certified peer counselor, you have to have that specific lived experience, and you cannot work outside the scope of that lived experience. And then, of course, the main funding difference is that certified peer counselors get reimbursed by Medicaid. You also then have the duty to warn and the mandated reporting, which are very clinical, in clinical things that a certified peer counselor has to do, but that comes with the Medicaid territory. Any other questions? Anybody here thinking of really actually starting a peer support program? I know.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just Ronita. Yes, I'm looking again. That's what we're in the process of doing, starting our peer program, and I have our consultant and Dr. Eve on with us, who's working with us, and she's in North Carolina, and she's already started her curriculum and program there. We're looking to adapt that program because it's specifically geared towards, well, it's for anybody, but specifically was created for BIPOC communities. And I don't know if Dr. Eve, if you was able to share about that, but that's what we're in the process of doing with the peer run funding we received from ACA. And again, I'm just jumping back into, I'm kind of multitasking.
Oh, no, I love it. I love it. So are you working with Lauren Robbins by any chance?
Yes.
Okay, that is so cool. So we are consultants on that project, and we would be able to consult with you for free. But what I would recommend is Jones Community Solutions, and I have actually connected them with Lauren so that they can have a wider range of consultants that actually include BIPOC community members and agencies that are serving BIPOC communities.
Okay, yeah, because I know you had said you were gonna do an introduction or something, email in a chat earlier in a presentation, so that'll be great to to do that and follow up. Do I need to send you my email information or put it in a chat?
Yes. Oh, I made a big misspelling there. Yeah. Would you do me a favor and just put your email real quick in there, and then I will send you. I'll send an email out.
Okay.
And since you're a part of that program, I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about that program, but that consulting would be for free for you. And it's generally like $250 an hour.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anything on your guys' mind? I know I went over a ton of stuff today. You guys have been great.
I would like to just take time to officially introduce myself. Thank you, Renita. Thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing. I am a health and human service educator, and I created a program called Innovative Approaches to Manifesting Wealth and Excellence. It is designed to create collective opportunities for those with lived experiences, to create alternatives to dominant institutional cultures, to help them to create economic stability using the 5 core areas and concerns around economic stability, healthcare, education, network, neighborhood and built environments, and social support, equitable distribution of resources in the community. And it is designed to create collective within B2B. So it's a concept of helping to launch programs that provide support for those with lived experience. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Welcome. That is amazing. And Renita, I got your Caring Peers. I got your email, and I will, within the next couple of days, I'll make that introduction. It'll probably be right after this training, but I don't want to promise anything. Sometimes I do a training and I go crack.
I know. Yeah, thank you too. I appreciate it, Stephanie. Thank you too, Dr. Eve.
All right. Any other questions?
This isn't a question, but can I just say thank you so much for letting me join in. I've been doing this for years and years, and you kind of forget all the things that are involved in all aspects of things. And I'm most closely attached to anything peer related. And I'm so thankful for this. This was a good oversight and review. Anything that Stephanie does as far as the training goes is awesome. So I will hopefully be able to attend more, but I really have appreciated this. You know, I don't feel like, oh, I already know what a CPC is. I'm like, holy cow, I forgot all about that. And look at this and look what you're doing now. And so this is so wonderful. And so thank you to Brianna and you for saying, okay, sure, you can join. So, I
we're glad
appreciate
you're here.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
And I'll see you next week, Stephanie.
I was just gonna say, I'll see you at Ocean Shores next week, won't I? That'll be great. Motivational interviewing. That'll be the training I do that. All right, you guys, I'm gonna hand it back over to Brianna so she can do some wrap up and some housekeeping. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time and energy and all your great questions throughout the day. And please do not hesitate to connect with me. There's no dumb questions. I promise you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you everyone for attending today. Yeah, so I'll gather up all those resources that Stephanie was referring to, and I'll send them to the email that you registered to for this event for. So yeah, you're expecting those maybe in the next day or so. So just thanks again for everyone. And we'll also attach Stephanie's contact information as well to the email. Feel free to reach out to her. And thank you, Stephanie, for putting this on for us and sharing all your wisdom.
It was my pleasure.
Support.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome. Hi, Vicki. I would give you such a hug.
I know. I want to hug you too. Awesome. Thanks, Brianna.
Thank you. All right.
Bye, you guys.
Hope you guys have a good day. Bye-bye.
Happy weekend.
Thank you, you too.